Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Food Awakenings, where we explore the greatest medical miracle of our lifetime, real food. Each week, we explore the mysteries and magic within food and the implications for healing human and planet through the growing movements in living food, wild foods, and superfoods. With you is your host, Dr. Ariel Policano, naturopathic physician, researcher, and author, with weekly guests, the latest in food research, and your phone calls. And now your host, Dr. Ariel Policano.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to Food Awakenings. So glad that you're joining us here today. Well, last week we had a few kind of spirit dancing things going on and a few challenges, so I wanted to reintroduce the show, and I wanted to tell you that this is a show about food, about living foods, about wild foods, about superfoods. It's also about the beautiful relationship that humans have with the planet. And the more that we embrace these foods that nourish us so much, the living foods, superfoods, and wild foods, the healthier that we become, but also the healthier the earth becomes. And we'll be talking a lot about that. I want to tell you that the show comes to you on the Health and Harmony Network. And if you haven't checked out any of the other shows on the Health and Harmony Network, I want to invite you to do so. The founder of the Health and Harmony Radio Network is Mary Elizabeth Sir, and she has an amazing show called Health and Harmony. And I was just listening to a couple of different shows, one about sound healing that really blew me away, about using tuning forks on the meridians of the body to bring peace and healing, and that was wonderful. And I also want to mention we have the acclaimed documentary filmmaker, Corey Brackett, who does a show called Sweet Remedy Radio, and that is really about the toxins in the environment and the wonderful movements that are growing to educate us about the toxins in the environment. And Corey recently had a great show about the documentary that just came out called All Jacked Up. And I watched in horror a clip of All Jacked Up after listening to the show of a 16-year-old who went to the soda fountain with a 32-ounce cup and put in the cup Fanta, A&W, 7-Up, every soda imaginable, and drank that. And so with what I know about sugar and educate people about sugar, I was completely blown away. So please check out the amazing shows on the Health and Harmony Radio Network. And I want to tell you about this show. We are going to do some very good work today. We are going to be talking about mineral deficiencies, and in a totally different way than I think that you've ever heard them before, because a lot of times when we talk about mineral deficiencies, the show or the information is usually about the need for supplementation. You know, Food Awakenings is about educating you about how to get your nourishment from the most bioavailable thing that we have, which is real food. And so this show helps us to understand how we can remineralize our food, which is so mineral deficient, by mineralizing the soil with seawater. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let me tell you, for those listening live, we have a live call-in number, and it's 914-338-0821. 914-338-0821. We're also live in the chat room, so you can join us there. For the first person who calls in today, and I think we do have a caller, so caller, you may be the lucky one. I'll take a caller at random if we have somebody else chime in the next little bit. But when you're ready with a question, when we're ready to go, I think I'll take a random caller who's going to win a calendar. We have a wonderful moon calendar donated by Katrina Blair of Turtle Lake Refuge, and I will send that to the person the caller I pick at random with a question. We thank you for calling in with your questions about this topic. So without further ado, let me tell you about our guest today. And today we have the president and CEO of a company called Ocean Grown. Ocean Grown is a company that is harvesting seawater to remineralize our soil. And today we have John Hartman with us. John Hartman's experience was actually 30 years as an electrical engineer. And John has had a lifelong interest in nutrition and was just happened to be, because of course, everything is just a coincidence, just happened to be at a health seminar when he first heard of the research we're going to be talking about today by Dr. Maynard Murray and learned about seawater. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ariel. Pleasure to be here.
Well, great. Well, I mentioned right away Maynard Murray, and I wanted to talk a little bit about his book, which really knocked my socks off, called Sea Energy Agriculture. And I wondered, from your impression, obviously you're very familiar with his book, he seemed to be saying that that our soil, he had established in his many, many years of research that our soil was actually, he was very clear that our soil had become deficient, and this was in the 70s. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, it was. And, maybe just to say that, as early as the early 30s, there was a presentation to Congress, and you can find it on the Internet. Rex Beach will probably bring it up quickly, where he describes the soils in the 1930s as being completely depleted of minerals.
So that long ago, in the 30s.
That long ago. But at the same time, Dr. Murray, in the 30s, was an intern at Massachusetts General, getting his internist degree, and he later got an ear, nose, and throat degree as well. And, at the end of a long 12-hour shift, he would take a walk on the docks in Boston. And one particular night, he struck up a conversation with a fisherman who fished the Grand Banks. And he said to him, all day long I deal with cancer and hypertension and tumors on my patients. Just out of curiosity, what do fish get? And the fisherman shot right back and said, I've been fishing the Grand Banks for 40 years and I've never seen a sick fish. And you can imagine the light bulb going off in his head. He was flabbergasted, Dr. Murray was. And it started really his lifelong research about food and minerals and what is special about seawater.
That story is very striking, and I think the first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind is, but what about the poisons that the fish have consumed? I assume that you're suggesting that the fish were very healthy because they're living immersed in this incredible seawater mineralization. Do they have any inherent protection from mercury and other such things because of that?
Well, really, mercury is a special case, and we can talk about it. But really, fish, and we're talking not coastal fish. We're talking about fish in the open, deep ocean, and which the ocean in those areas is a self-cleaning, self-balancing fluid, and chemically a solution, a true solution. And everywhere in the world, all the minerals are in the same proportion, in the same order. And what I mean by self-balancing is that it was always a curiosity in the South Pacific where we had these volcanic vents. There was always manganese in these balls sort of rolling around on the sea floor. And after a lot of research, the scientists came to that when manganese reached a certain percentage or proportion in seawater, it would precipitate out all the excess. So always self-balancing, always self-cleaning, and in the open ocean, fish are healthy, and there are really no toxins. Mercury is a special case just because it has an accumulative effect in the body tissue. And it just happens to be in certain kinds of fish, but the mercury level in seawater is very constant, and you have it in your blood fluid too, and it's in the same proportion. In fact, your blood is quarter-strength seawater, pretty nearly identical, except
I remember reading that, and I was very impressed by that. And I think we've all come from the sea, and I know that the seawater has many of the minerals that we need. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we can't actually extract these minerals from seawater, from the water to a human. Is that right?
That's right. And the reason is, and most animals can't actually do it. The closest one are the ruminants, like cows. And the reason is they obviously have two stomachs, and they have special bacteria that has some effectiveness in converting inorganic minerals directly. And otherwise, everything else has to take their minerals in through animals or through plants. And it's a lovely relationship. We exhale carbon dioxide. Plants inhale it. They strip off the oxygen and liberate it into the atmosphere for us to breathe. They take the carbon and they compound it with all those minerals.
It is. It's a beautiful partnership. I mean, we can't really be without each other, and there's, I think it evokes a beautiful respect for the plant life, because without them, we really can't exist. And I really wanted to touch on something that I think is so important. A lot of people think that they know that the soil is deficient. They know that maybe even their food is deficient, and there's probably millions and even billions of dollars that people spend every year on mineral supplements. How would you say that getting minerals from the food would be different from getting minerals from supplements, like, for example, calcium carbonate as an example?
Sure. Well, the human body really only recognizes compounds that have a carbon atom on them, and that's chemically, technically, how it's determined to be organic. There's a few exceptions to that, but basically carbon compounds with carbon attached is how you get organic molecules. And the body really only recognizes things with carbon as food. And everything else that's inorganic without the carbon, the body struggles to eliminate it in the best way it can, and sometimes fairly unsuccessfully, and it just tries to lodge it in places in the body where it does the least amount of damage, away from vital organs. So it tends to accumulate in joints. And but what happens if you take supplements and other things like calcium carbonate that you mentioned, it's not food to the body, and it tends to be eliminated. And if it's originally derived from a living source, what happens is it gets denatured. It gets heated and damaged so that it actually liberates the carbon. And so it's not very effective. And most people have had the experience of flushing the toilet after going to the bathroom. Sorry to get into this, but most of it, you can tell most of it goes down the toilet, and there goes your money, and not very effective.
Even David Wolfe, who a lot of people recognize as a leader in the live food movement, he's recently talked about the calcium, taking the calcium carbonate, actually building up and causing plaque in the vessels, atherosclerosis, and therefore he himself does not recommend that anybody, at the very least, take a calcium supplement. So we're really left with, a big problem,
Yeah.
if we can't supplement with minerals.
Well, let me just pose this to you, which is kind of a curiosity. You see all these cows running around in the field, and, they're 2,000 pounds. They're huge. They're heavy. They're strong. They never suffer from osteoporosis. They're generally in good health, and they have a single food. How do they do that? And
I'm assuming you're suggesting grass as their
grass
single food.
It's a good segue, actually, to the fact that all fruits and vegetables take up different numbers of elements, and it just happens that most of the grasses pick up all 90, and that's why they're such amazing foods, and that's why, cattle can be so healthy on a single food.
Well, we can pause there for a moment. I mean, wheatgrass is a special fascination of mine, but of course we can attribute it to any of the grasses. And you're saying that grass is special in that from the soil it's able to extract how many minerals?
All 90 natural.
All 90 minerals. That's amazing.
It is truly amazing. And, it's why you see in most foraging animals, they're very, very healthy. And just grass does a great job, and their grass is genetically disposed to pick up all 90, whereas a tomato might be only 54. Sweet potato might be 70, well, it's 76. And every fruit and vegetable has a different number. But what you're really trying to do is replace the minerals that you shed or eliminate. And grass is very effective, but when I eat, I'm always looking for things to pick up a lot. And
exactly.
So that's sort of how I forage for food.
That's fantastic. I mean, a lot of people don't know, and I want to, as we've almost gone a little bit ahead of ourselves, for those who are listening, some may or may not be aware of some of the implications of mineral deficiencies, maybe just know, okay, well, I have to get my fruits and vegetables, I have to have minerals. I just wanted to read one paragraph real quickly from Dr. Murray's book because it leads us into just talking about minerals, and I love the way he writes, so just kind of straight to the point. He says, there is no excuse for 97% of Americans having some kind of chronic dental disease. And he says that's a terrible statistic, and he loves the way he speaks, says it's damn near everybody. Visual impairments requiring corrective lenses belong to nearly half the population, especially when one considers the great number of people who need glasses but have not yet become a statistic. Every year, more than 1 million people die of heart and vascular disease, and 1 out of every 16 Americans aches with arthritis and rheumatism. Now, this book was written in 1976. And John, I think that what is being suggested here, he's not just writing about health, he's suggesting that dental disease, eye problems, heart disease, joint problems, all are as a result of the mineral deficiencies in our soil.
Absolutely. I have not one bit of doubt that that's correct.
You're saying you don't have any doubt that that's correct?
None whatsoever.
And from what I know in my training, of course, there's high blood pressure associated with magnesium deficiency, osteoporosis associated with a magnesium deficiency, not the calcium deficiency as we have thought, attention deficit disorder with a zinc deficiency, and it goes on and on and on. We're really facing, this is a kind of a life or death thing that we're really facing with all the mineral deficiencies that we have to come to a reality to that are existing in our soil right now.
Yes.
So how is it then that your company extracts seawater, and how is it that the seawater interacts with the soil? Explain that relationship, how the seawater kind of solves this problem that we're talking about.
Right. Well, just to back up for a minute, we purchased Dr. Murray's test farm in 1982, and he trained up one of our partners for a year before his death, and the technology sort of languished for some time, and then we got serious about it right around year 2000. And what we do is we go out to sea on a ship because, you can't do it coastally. The coastal waters are polluted, and there are other issues as well in coastal areas. And our port is in Fort Pierce, Florida, and we go out to sea. We go at least to the middle and mostly to the other side of the Gulf Stream, because the Gulf Stream is kind of like the placental barrier in the womb. It keeps all the crummy stuff near the coast, and all the clean water. As soon as you cross, you can see it as you're going across it in the ship. You can
actually see it. What would you see?
Well, it just turns incredibly clear, and crystal clear. It just turns clear, and we put our machinery aboard the ship, and we're extracting the minerals. And when we come back to the port, we have an extract. It's still in solution. It's still a solution. There's no solids that you can see on the bottom or anything like that. It's a true chemical solution where everything is dissolved in the water. And what we then do is we quarantine that product, and we test it for 70 different pollutants. And unless it comes back with all 70 as none detected, and their detection limit is 0.5 part per billion, we won't package it. And so we don't talk about the process. It's provisional process patent pending, and there's some trade secrets involved as well. But a gallon of that extract will treat up to 10 acres one application.
Wow.
And it can be done in the soil. It can be done hydroponically. It can be done aeroponically. Our little test farm in Fort Myers that we had a few years back, we did it in gravel just to demonstrate that, it really doesn't matter what the media is. We can grow the most delicious, tasty food that, by the way, you don't even have to taste it to determine which is which. You can smell it. It's that different. And
I remember as a child, one of my favorite fruits being the watermelon, and I literally remember that smell of cutting the watermelon and the color. And I have not found one watermelon seedless, which I despise, seeded,
right.
Organic. I have not found one that has that kind of wonderful, rich, watermelon smell.
Right.
Since I was a kid, and I'm assuming that's a classic sign of the minerals not being in the watermelon.
Right, it is. It is very much a classic sign, and just as a futile exercise, every time I go to the grocery store, I buy one of every tomato on the rack, just to see if somebody surprises me, but they never do.
When I was up in Oregon, my friend uses the seawater for her organic farm, and I absolutely saw the difference in color. I was really blown away by the difference in color and the difference in taste, and both of these things are signs of the minerals.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you been able to, besides the taste test, quantify this difference that you're actually seeing and smelling and tasting?
Yeah, and what we've done, and some of it's on our website, oceangrown.com. Some of the testing is there. We've done tomato and green pepper tests. We've done, of course, wheatgrass testing and enzymes and amino acids and vitamins.
And so you're actually testing against a non-seawater treated control, so to speak, to see the difference in the minerals. Okay, that's amazing.
One of the tests was done with the most popular and expensive hydroponic formula. I think it had 8 or 12 elements in it. And, everybody's heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. Mm-hmm. And, if something requires 56 elements, then if you grow it with 12, how can it be what it needs to be? And, all the things have to be there, or it's not going to live up to its genetic permissions, the tomato. And, the tomato makes compounds like lycopene, which people are saying can cure certain kinds of cancer. So those things can't be there, and they can't be effective unless the plant has access to everything it requires. It can't, the first doctor, Hippocrates, said, let food be your medicine and medicine your food. But how can it be if it's grown with 3 elements or 6 elements or 12 elements if it needs 56?
I think it's so profound to realize that without the right minerals, the plant can't live up to its potential. And equally, there's an amazing parallel. Without our minerals, we don't even express our DNA completely, so we don't live up to our potential. And it's just this amazing parallel and this amazing a dance of cooperation where we have to recognize the mineral deficiencies in the soil, and really it makes me really realize how much we have to respect the soil and nurture the soil.
Right.
So with the seawater, people might be at home saying, well, I don't know of any growers currently who are growing food that I could get. Now, can people garden with the seawater?
Yes. It can be used absolutely on everything. I mean, it can be used on houseplants, on orchids, on, flowering plants in the garden. It can be used on lawn. We're using it on golf courses now. In fact, Callaway's test golf course in Carlsbad, California is using it. Our first success was in commodity farmers in the Midwest. I mean, we ship it to South Dakota and Nebraska and are getting the most incredible results both on yield and also disease resistance, because one of the things Dr. Murray mentions in the book is that just like humans, when plants have access to all the things that they need, their immune system will pretty much take care of everything. When you hear about these incredible plagues in Africa and South America, these hemorrhagic fevers and things like that would go through and decimate villages, not everybody died. Maybe 50% died. But the other 50% had enough of an intact immune system to keep them alive. And it's the same thing with plants. If they get what they need, you don't need to use fungicides and pesticides and all the other chemicals that they use. And one of the things that these commodity farmers are realizing is that not only is it less expensive to feed your plants this way, but you save also a lot of money by not having to use the harsh chemicals to kill everything else.
It's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's brilliant because of the health implications, of course, for the farmer and everyone else, for the amount of pesticides and fungicides and herbicides that are sprayed. So this holds so much hope to be able to use the seawater to improve the immune system of the plant, which will become more naturally resistant to these pests.
Yeah. Just a quick story. One of Dr. Murray's good friends was a Dr. Philip Callahan, who was a professor at University of Florida. And when you went into his office when he was teaching there, he had these 8-foot-tall black and white pictures of insect antennae. And he said, one of those is tuned to the infrared. It's just like the Predator, the movie. Insects are opportunistic. They're like vultures. They see in the infrared, and what they're looking for is the heat signature of plants in decay. And when they see it, they go for it. And, he was the one who really could explain why our plants weren't attacked.
It's like it's their role, really, to devour these plants that are weaker. It's kind of the whole natural system of life. So if something's weaker or it's starting to compost, it's their role to eliminate it. But how wonderful to realize that when the plant has the minerals, that it will be resistant. And I'm impressed that even golf courses are taking advantage of it, because these are one of the most chemical-laden places that a person can, don't go to golf unless you're going to do a big detox afterwards.
That's right. Well, one of the, I know we're probably jump a little bit all over the place, but, between the offspring of sports people and migrant pickers, they have the highest rate of genetic deformity in offspring. And you just got to wonder about that.
Yes, so sports, so the person playing on the baseball field, the golfer playing on the golf course, this is what you're implying.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and they're coming from, in some ways, from the profit motive. Hopefully they're coming from the wanting to heal and not harm motive as well. But I'm very impressed that golf courses are using the seawater. Are farmers getting a greater yield from using seawater?
Yeah, typically what happens, and we're now in about our 5th year of production and shipping to large farms in the Midwest and other places, but that's our longest experience. And what we typically see is in a good year, and what I mean by that is where the rain is right, the temperatures are right, everything goes right. In a good year, we're out yielding the NPK/chemical farmers, 5%, 10%, something like that. But in a bad year, it's extraordinary. We could double that. We could double their yields. In fact, 2 years ago, we had a situation where in winter wheat, the people that were doing normal chemical agriculture just collected the insurance. They didn't even get a crop. And we got a very respectable crop. I mean, it was more than double the yield of the chemical farmers. So again, it's making the plant strong enough to withstand drought and high temperatures. and it was just amazing.
That's what I was saying. I was curious about why in a bad year you were still getting such good results. But again, it's because of that strength of the plant that stems from the minerals.
That's right.
You know, there's several other questions I want to pose to you, and I just want to pause for a moment and let people know who are in the chat room that you can ask questions from the chat room. You can, if you're listening online, you can go into the chat room and ask questions from there, and you can also call us. We'll take any questions that you have. I do have a giveaway for a caller, which is an amazing calendar from Turtle Lake Refuge that has some wonderful wild food pictures and wild food recipes in it. And the number to call in on is 914-338-0821, 914-338-0821. John, back to some of the seawater. And again, I think I just want to touch on this point again, that when I'm out there talking about, I'm very excited about seawater and talk about it quite a bit. When I talk to people, again, they pose that question, well, isn't our water, our oceans, aren't they full of toxins? And I'd love for you to kind of reiterate that point about that you go out far enough where these toxins are actually not present because of the self-cleaning nature of the ocean?
That's right. Yeah, it's actually extraordinary. The volume is, first of all, the volume is extraordinary. People have no idea how many cubic miles of seawater there is. But just, give you for instance, just so you can make a comparison, the planet's total consumption of oil in a year is 1 cubic mile. Now, sort of make a mental comparison between that and what you know to be the expanse of ocean. It's just extraordinary. Most pollutants, most oil-type pollutants, float to the surface and evaporate, and eventually what's left eventually gets absorbed. But yeah, we do extensive testing for pollutants, and we just don't find any in the open, deep ocean. We just don't find it.
That, I think, will come as a real surprise to a lot of people. So this place that you're extracting from, and again, you're testing, is free from any contaminants that could potentially be transferred through the soil.
That's right.
And tell me a little bit about what organic farms are currently using the seawater, and in what parts of the country, and what differences have they seen? You mentioned yield. Are there any other things that they've given back to you, any other feedback about their growing experience? Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is that, most of our users are not organic farms. And, part of that, I think, is because it's very expensive to be a chemical farmer these days. I mean, you hear it in the news every day, with the oil prices climbing up. Most fertilizers are in some way derivative of oil, or they're very, dependent on oil. So the prices are going through the ceiling. They're always looking for better ways, less expensive ways. But, most boxes and barrels that end up on a farm, have a skull and crossbones on them. Mm-hmm. And, that's got to give you pause, especially if you're handling it and spraying it, and you have to wear a respirator and goggles and gloves. And so, they see that, it doesn't affect them well. It can't be making good food. So mostly our early success was with chemical farmers. And the nice thing is that they can easily transition to being organic farmers, and at the same time, of course, their health gets better. They're not spraying poisons everywhere. And but with organic farming, what you have, people are using manures and worm casings and bacterias and teas of various kinds. But all those things don't restore the minerals. It's again, manure is only as good as the field that the cow ate from.
Exactly.
Exactly. And it's actually, let me tell a really good Dr. Murray story.
Okay, well, hold that thought. I want to get into that. I want to hear this story. And also, we have a caller, so let me put the caller on the air.
Okay.
Hello, caller.
Hello.
Did you have a question for John? And welcome.
Hi. Well, thank you for hosting this. This is fabulous. I'm very curious about this. And I don't want to interrupt his train of thought. My question is, how does using ocean solution compare with doing something like dissolving Celtic sea salt in water or using seaweed concentrate? How does it compare in terms of how effective it is?
Excellent.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Listen, I applaud everybody that is doing things that restore minerals to land, whether it be, fish emulsion or seaweed concentrates or Celtic sea salt. The comparisons are these, though, that, just like terrestrial plants, all seaweeds have a different number of elements that they assimilate. And, if you happen to find the one that's like wheatgrass or barley grass that picks up all 90, that's great. But typically they don't. And the other thing is they generally come in the wrong form. As opposed to humans who can only really absorb organic compounds, plants only absorb inorganic compounds. So seaweed comes sort of in the wrong form, like fish emulsion does. So that's the comparison. But again, it's putting back, way more minerals than would be, NPK or anything else in the chemical domains.
So to sum up, if somebody took seawater, not seawater, but the sea salt, and I love this question. I think this is a very interesting point that a lot of people will ask and probably ask you. If they take it and they dilute it and they try to put it on their soil, and this is maybe, to give it a number, maybe 1% as effective or 10% as effective as using seawater?
Well, you lose a lot of the elements is the first problem. You lose the gases right away in the evaporative process, so they're gone. And then there are things in the matrix that are in the parts per billion and the parts per quadrillion. And what happens is in the evaporative process, you lose those ultra trace elements. And not only do you lose them, but they're in, the compound is now a natural desiccant. In other words, in the Midwest, they spread sodium chloride on dirt roads just to keep the dust down because it absorbs the water. You see? So here you have your Celtic sea salts, and they're pulling moisture out of the air, and those leach out even more minerals. So what you're left with is something that maybe has 55, 60 elements, whereas in our extract solution, you have all 90, and they're always there. They can't escape.
So it's actually very important to keep it in the solution.
Yes. But again, I applaud it because it's way better than anything else that people have been doing for years. So it's a better method. I'm glad they're doing it, and great.
Oh, thank you. And I have a follow-up question, and that concerns fish emulsion and seaweed concentrates or different forms of seaweed. Because perhaps I misunderstand, but I thought that the soil bacteria would break down the fish emulsion and the seaweed and then make the minerals in turn available to the plant roots.
That is what happens. That's correct. That is what happens. But if you have the opportunity to use an IV form of that, which is what a true inorganic ionic solution is, and that's what seawater is, the minerals are rain fast and in the plant in 5 or 10 minutes. You see?
Wow.
So you bypass the whole bacterial action that could take months and years. And, so you're kind of skipping. Now listen, if you want to fix soil, that's one thing. If you want to grow great food, that's kind of a different project in my mind.
So they're two different, these are two distinctly different things.
Yeah.
Now,
and okay,
go ahead, caller.
I have a third question, and that is using. This is of particular interest to me because I knowing that weeds are so beneficial, I let them flourish in my community garden, and as a result, I lost my community garden, and just before winter. So what I'm up against is growing sprouts, and I did get an Easy Green sprouter from Patty Foley at the Rose Street Festival, and I am going to be growing plants in containers, things like sunflower seeds and buckwheat sprouts. And so my question is, using Ocean Solution, will I have food that's adequately nutritious going with that system of container planting over the winter?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's life-saving.
Yeah.
Holly, thank you so much for your excellent questions. Those are really very insightful. I enjoyed them, and I want to make sure that you know that you are going to get a calendar, the Turtle Lake Refuge Wild Food Calendar. Just go ahead and email me at my email address, which is drariel@gmail.com, with the doctor spelled out.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day. Thanks again for your call.
Thank you for the information.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks.
John?
Yes.
It was such a great call. It made me think of so many different things. And the one thing about the seawater I remember reading in Dr. Murray's book is that he had to figure out a way to the salinity of the salt, but the salinity could actually kill the plants. Is that right? If you just take salty water?
Yeah. The stories that go with it are two. One biblical, historical, and the other pretty recent. Of course, everybody remembers the tsunami, and they remember that it killed everything. What didn't happen is, it was a year later. It wasn't a news story anymore. But there are news stories. It's on our website. Is that the next year they had the greatest crop in recorded human history in that area.
Wow.
So in excess, yeah, absolutely. Seawater can kill anything, but if you properly dilute it, everything will thrive. And the biblical story is, people remember that the Romans used to invade countries and salt the fields. And the reason they did it is they wanted to take control of the country through economic, without firing a shot, if you will, if they could. And so that's what they would do. But again, you don't see the follow-up story, which is next year they had the best crop in recorded history.
So it becomes down to a matter of dilution?
Yes.
Okay. Because I remember it talked about
economics, of course, because it's tough to ship seawater to South Dakota. It's so amazing to talk about these conventional farms, and it really makes me want to cry because these conventional farms are, for my training, the cause of a lot of suffering, of course, because of the mineral deficiencies, but I talk to people so much about conventional fruits and vegetables having all of this pesticide residue. Can you talk a little bit about the current state of agribusiness, kind of before seawater entered the picture, in terms of the pesticides and also the fertilizers necessary? Talk about the implication of using NPK. Well, I just happen to have, I don't know how political we want to get tonight, but
okay. Go for it.
Yeah, okay. I happen to have printed out something from a website called Nutrients for Life, and it's a subset. You'll find a link on the Fertilizer Institute's website, which is, I think, tfi.com or .org. But the point being is that, the NPK was sort of accidentally came about as the agricultural norm, if you will, because there was a lot of it in excess after the war, because it also happens to be used for munitions.
Amazing.
But, it doesn't grow good food, but I have to read you this paragraph. Let me just get to where I can read it. What they did is they sponsored a professorship. And let me just read it to you. It is
Yeah.
our hope that this professorship will encourage the expansion of untapped and important area in academic research, said the director. If, as predicted, a correlation between fertilizer and healthier foods is established, imagine the impact. An increasingly health-conscious public will finally regard fertilizers for what they truly are, nutritious. It's just, it's just incredible because, and this brings me back to the story I wanted to tell you about Dr. Murray.
Oh, perfect.
And what he used to do, in fact, he did this at a keynote convention in, I think, 1976 in St. Louis, which is where it's going to be this year again. It hasn't been there in a while. But he started out the lecture just by, show of hands. How many of you are farmers? And, of course, that means mostly everybody at this particular show. And then he would ask, and there would be several hundred people in the audience, and he'd ask them, what is your core business? And, one farmer would say, well, I raise cattle, and that's what I do. And another one would say, well, I raise corn and soybeans, and that's what I do. And he'd do that for about 10 minutes, get all kinds of answers. And then he'd stop them, and he'd say, that's not your business. What your business is you're a strip miner. But instead of dynamite, you use seeds to break the minerals from their holding matrix. And then you ship those products, whether it be beef or corn or soybeans or oats, you ship them to market, and that's what you do. You're a strip miner. You strip the minerals out of the soil, and you ship them away.
He saw the world as this amazing exchange. He saw the world as this amazing exchange of minerals. It's incredible.
Yeah. And what they put back are three things: nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that eventually the food's not going to have any value.
Exactly.
And so then you have to think about, well, okay, if all those elements were there in the soil before we first tilled it, how do you put them back? What proportion? I mean, how do you, where's the roadmap? It's hopeless. But the nice thing is that, if you look at, the chlorophyll makeup, which is the blood of the plant, in places where they've never tilled the soil, it has almost an identical makeup proportion and order as seawater. And, we've already talked about human blood being quarter-strength seawater. Dr. Rene Quintone did a lot of experiments in the early 30s, and you'll find this on the web, too. He drained most of the blood out of a dog, and I'm sorry, you PETA fans, but the good news is he replaced it with clean, dilute seawater, and in half an hour the dog was running around and perfectly healthy.
Because these elements that make up the plasma or make up the blood are so similar, have such similarity to seawater, essentially.
Yep. Exactly.
Something that also when I'm out talking to people about this miraculous discovery about seawater, they ask about the sustainability of it. And tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. The good news is that there's so much out there. I mean, you just can't even begin to touch what's there. And at the end of the day, agricultural runoff is the largest pollutant on the planet. So, but it's a haphazard collection of things. It's nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, all the synthetic chemicals that are used in pesticides and herbicides and fungicides. But think about it. If there's excess in the sea energy agriculture, which is what Dr. Murray called it, if there's excess and it gets leached into the groundwater, or it's just going to go back into the sea, and the sea will it's actually the perfect recycle job. It just goes back, the sea rebalances itself, and off you go.
But you're not talking about the NPK. You're talking about a natural process of recycling. I'm not sure that.
That's right. That's right.
In terms of the natural runoff of real minerals from the soil, is that what you're talking about?
That's right. And also in everything that decomposes, whether it be plants, humans, animals, that are minerally intact. So everything is, everything that goes back into the ocean is what we took out in effect. And what imbalances there are will get trimmed up by the natural living force that is seawater, which, by the way, we haven't talked about the bacteria in seawater, but they're pretty amazing too.
Well, let's go ahead. Let's get right into it. Tell me about, I'm not sure I
the
understand what the implications of the bacteria would be for the soil, so please enlighten us about that.
Yeah. There's 3 different kinds of aerobic bacteria in seawater, but a couple of them are really important to us, and that's Azobacter and Nitrobacter. And both of them, especially Nitrobacter, does a phenomenal job of fixing nitrogen, which is, of course, the N of NPK.
Right.
And 4/5 of what we breathe is nitrogen. So it gets fixed only a couple of different ways. Lightning can fix nitrogen, but most of it is fixed through aerobic bacteria. And when the seawater comes naturally with it, in our process, we go to great pains to make sure that those bacteria stay happy and healthy. And when they get into the soil,
what kinds of things do you do to keep them happy and healthy?
TV dinners, good music. No. But no, if you don't watch, in the process that we have, if you do it in a different way, you can kill them. And so we take great pains not to do that. But they take a little while to get established in the soil. But by the 3rd year, they're fixing about 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. And I'll give you for instance. When we go head-to-head with the chemical companies in South Dakota and Nebraska, the ag schools are recommending that those farmers, to get 200 bushels of corn per acre, they're recommending that they put 280 pounds of nitrogen down per acre. Well, wow. The first year, we cut them down to 90 pounds, and some of them are off nitrogen altogether. But the 40 pounds at the back, well, first of all, just to back up a second here, nitrogen is an incredibly volatile compound. It wants to evaporate into the air the instant you put it in the ground or leach into the groundwater. So out of that incredible amount of nitrogen you put on the field, if there's 10 or 20 pounds available to the plant at the end of the day, you'll be very lucky. Whereas in our world, that 40 pounds of bacteria-fixed nitrogen is highly available to the plant. And this is why we can do what we do, and we can beat the yields of the chemical farmers.
So again, there's that theme between we're just going to add it in, we're just going to put something back in kind of with our bodies, the synthetic minerals, versus here is a way it can come naturally from the bacteria, which is so much more efficient and so much more readily available.
Right, and utterly harmless to humans. And, our product, we're required to have a material safety data sheet to ship it. We're not required. We do include it when we ship it, but we're not required because it's such a safe product. But, I can literally take our extract and dive into the 10,000-gallon tank,
That's amazing.
You can't do that.
How would you compare that to the MSDS, the material safety data sheet of nitrogen, of NPK?
Well, most nitrogen in commodity farming comes in the form of anhydrous ammonia, and it's literally a liquefied gas that gets slit. They use knives, and then they inject it behind the knife. It's injected into the soil. That is utterly deadly. That kills farmers every year.
Really?
Yeah.
And these farmers were able to, you talked about something in the order of 75% reduction of the nitrogen, almost, or I should say in some cases, complete reduction of something that's so harmful, the anhydrous ammonia, the NPK, et cetera.
Yes.
It's amazing. I mean, it's really, you must be happy to go to work every day.
We love going to work every day. We go to work. That's the problem. It's tough to, we have a new rule. Well, not a completely new rule, but Sunday we're definitely resting. But we work 12 hours a day like it was an hour. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Have these farms that you've been talking about, are some of them completely off of their pesticides and herbicides?
Absolutely. In fact,
they are.
This year was a lot of fun because, they had a lot of fungus up in South Dakota, again in Nebraska, and the people that were on our programs, it's 3 applications. It costs $51 an acre, and this is on wheat. And our guys didn't have to use any fungicides. So they walk away with $51 an acre. They might have 4 or 5,000 acres in wheat. It's a phenomenal expense, and it's dangerous to apply, and you don't have to use it.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. These companies that make these the fungicides and the NPK, they're not going to like you very much.
No.
You're going to be putting them out of business pretty soon. Oh, my gosh. Well, we're actually down to the last few minutes of this show, John. Was there anything else about seawater that you wanted to let us know or make sure that we didn't leave without touching on?
Yeah, I think, as many stories as I can tell about Dr. Murray is the best way to spend it. But one of the other great stories is that when he was young, he used to sign on to fishing vessels because he was a mad scientist and researched everything. And he tried to autopsy everything he could find. And one particular day down in the South Atlantic, they found a dead whale, adult whale, and its infant offspring. And he sent tissue samples back from one of the organs to the university he was associated with in Chicago, LaSalle. And he gave them an A sample and a B sample, and he asked them, please tell me what the difference is. And they wrote back and said there's absolutely no difference. They could come from the same organism. But, the adult was 60 years old and the offspring was newly born. So what you have in the sea, coming back is this in effect, it's the fountain of youth. It's just amazing. It's just amazing.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting, and I want to thank you, John. I want to thank you so much. I want to let people know that they can find out more about what you do at oceangrown.com. Is that the best way for people to get in contact with what you do?
That is, and let me just say one other thing. Please tell your growers, if you're not growing your own food, please tell your growers to use things that have minerals in it, because it's that demand that will cause people to want to grow things a different way, and everything gets upgraded, but it has to come, I think, from the consumer.
Excellent. I'm so glad that we could tell people about that today, that they can ask for it, something that's naturally organic, and stop using all of the pesticides and chemicals, and use this, and also get all of the mineralization of their fruits and vegetables. John, thank you so much again.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure, and people, again, can go to oceangrown.com and direct their farmers. Always know your farmer, or the place where you get your produce. Encourage them to learn about seawater for our food. I also want to let you know the book that I've been talking about today is called Sea Energy Agriculture by Maynard Murray, and that's a book you can get at a bookstore or online. And I want to thank everybody for listening. Next week, we're going to be talking with Katrina Blair of Turtle Lake Refuge, and she's going to have some wonderful stories about wild foods and some great recipes. She's from Durango, Colorado. We're going to have a lot of fun. I look forward to reconnecting with you then. Have a wonderful week. Be well.